Okay, so welcome back. So one of the biggest themes this week in a lot of the stories that we've covered is this kind of ongoing effect of a talent shortage, the ongoing effect of staff shortages, and everything kind of affects everything else. We've had both Bonza and Rex talk loudly about this this week. Jake, tell us a little bit more about what's happening with Bonza and how the talent shortage is affecting them.
Yeah, so Bonza has, come out and said that there's been quite a few cancellations. Its cancellation rate, says its chief commercial officer Carly Povey, is too high. It's apparently cancelled around 4% of its flights since January. And has cancelled at least 7 future flights. Now it is letting the passengers know well in advance. According to the ACCC's June report, though, this is actually its cancellation rate for April was around 0.5%, which is the lowest of all the airlines measured. This is well below the worst offender. I'm sure you can guess who the worst offender was, at about 8%. Not naming names, Jetstar, but so. Compared to other airlines, this situation is relatively minor for Bonza. But the issue that Bonza is facing is it covers all these destinations that bigger airlines don't cover. That's its whole model, or it covers all these routes that bigger airlines don't cover. That's the whole reason to be for Bonza. And so if your flight gets cancelled from Sydney to Melbourne, no big deal. There'll be another one along in 15 minutes or whatever. But if your flight gets cancelled from Mackay to the Sunshine Coast, you're going to have a lot tougher time getting to the Sunshine Coast if the Sunshine Coast is where you especially need to be.
I feel very sorry for Bonza here because, like Jake said, they're in this unique position where they're a new airline, they're a small airline, and they run these low-frequency routes, which means they'll only fly once or twice a week somewhere. So if your flight does get cancelled or delayed, you're in a spot of bother. You're in a lot more trouble than you would be elsewhere, but it's kind of not necessarily their fault. But this underlying talent shortage particularly hurts smaller operators because if you're short of pilots or if you're short of engineers, then there's always the worry that a bigger, richer competitor could come out and pinch them or offer them a better deal. But when you are that small fish in the pond, you're particularly vulnerable. But we are now, what's it been? So in New South Wales, the kind of proper lockdowns ended in September, October 2021. Mm-hmm. So we're coming up now from 2 years from the bulk of the restrictions being lifted. We still have this problem with talent crisis. We still have this issue. When we went to Aviation Australia, did an open day in Brisbane, and we spoke about this before, one of the things we kept hearing over and over again from all the different organisations are we are struggling to find good people.
True. And it makes you wonder why we as an industry are now struggling. It's a number of things. We're not paying enough compared to offshore carriers. We're not offering enough compared to offshore carriers. Further to that, people who were in the industry for years and years and years and too scared to take the leap of faith leaving the industry, COVID hit, forced out of the industry, have realised that there's a life outside of aviation and that they can hold a regular Monday to Friday 9-to-5 job and earn good money.
Wait, there's a life outside of aviation?
Yeah, you can't say that on the show. That's no.
Well,
our commenters are going to string us up.
Apparently, there is a life outside of aviation.
Not a life I want to live.
Not a life I want to live either, but it's... Aviation's a tough gig. There's shift work, there's weekend work, there's time away from families. I lost count of the number of Christmases and birthdays and family events that I couldn't make because I was flying. You don't really have a social life. Your family, your chosen family, become your aviation colleagues. So it's tough to attract people into that.
Now, the argument would be, and this is not necessarily just an aviation argument, but particularly in the aviation industry, is the whole reason we had JobKeeper was to stop this very situation happening.
Absolutely
the whole
right.
reason we had JobKeeper was to allow all these organisations the confidence to keep on their employees. And so the argument, well, there's two sides of a story here, but the argument would go that airlines in particular let far too many people go. They took permanent redundancy. because they were like, well, we have no idea how the recovery is going to be. And that when things picked up, they actually picked up quicker than expected. And now everyone has found themselves falling short. And it's not an easy situation to rectify, because these especially skilled people, which one are hard to find, but secondly take a lot of time to train up. And it's not just going through your regular training. It is getting, as Alan Joyce, to paraphrase Alan Joyce would say, getting match fit. Those
Correct.
little bits of experience that take years to learn, suddenly you've lost them. And so we've emerged in a situation which we're very hard to rectify. Now,
well, Bonza has said that the issues with the pilot shortage are around its training program. So this is Carly Povey, the chief commercial officer, said there's been a delay in in-flight pilot training due to the knock-on impact of a number of maintenance issues, in particular bird strikes. This left 2 aircraft, and Bonza does not have a lot of aircraft to begin with. 2 aircraft were left unusable and on ground for what she said was a significant number of days. And she says, quote, clearly training is dependent on flying. Sadly, there is a direct correlation between the 2 issues. This has led to regrettable cancellation for customers.
Now, what I would say about that, and we do try to be quite impartial, but that statement by Bonza and the way they've approached this has been very good, very candid, very honest. They're not trying to play any kind of PR games, but it just is an underlying issue that the whole industry is grappling with.
And another one thing to consider as well, Bonza is using the 737 MAX. It is a new aircraft type to Australia. Virgin only got their first one last week. Bonza was the first Australian airline to bring in the 737 MAX. You've got to train people up on it, in particular, and that's what Virgin's doing with Monkey Maya. I have remembered. That's what Virgin is doing with Monkey Maya VH8IA, their first 737 MAX. They're flying it domestically for a little while to familiarize the crews with the plane, as well as to obtain regulatory approval. So this training issue is probably compounded by the fact that it is, to most Australian pilots, a completely new aircraft. Well, it's a 737, but a new kind of 737.
Now, I should say, just to wrap this up, in our next print edition, which we'll be polishing up in the next 4 or 5 weeks, will be coming out in about 6-7 weeks' time. We're going to write a thick feature looking at this in detail that Jake is going to write. So
I am?
You are. We have spoken about this. Yeah.
Damn it!
This is how you get them when they can't say no on the show. So if you are listening and you have something to contribute, if this has directly affected you, if you have some insight, or if you just want to get in touch, email jake.nelson@momentummedia.com.au. That's also the general email for any complaints and queries you may have about Australia Aviation.